So you've got an idea for that next great comic book or that next great epic Game of Thrones series. Well, I'm going to show you how to apply principles from the 3-act structure using a program called Scrivener that's popular with all the writers, and we're going to go over that in a second.
I ain't getting out of bed today.
Keep waking up from the previous night.
Now we're going to use the familiar story of Spider-Man's origin to take you through the 3-act structure. So you'll learn how to apply some of the things directly from the 3-act structure to the events of the storyline of Spider-Man's origin, which I've slightly modified from the original movies. Now I'm John, and when I'm not saving that one-legged guy from an ass-kicking contest, I do reviews and tutorials on the creative process. Now join me and remember where you were supposed to be by hitting that sub button, clicking that bell, and if you could drop a like, I'd really appreciate it. Starting off here, you can see my screen. I'm going to expand these folders, and I've pre-populated some of this. The 3-act structure is pretty simple. Act 1 setup, Act 2 conflict, Act 3 resolution. Setup is sort of self-explanatory, but what you see here is I took some of the notes from the YouTuber katytastic as a cheat sheet here, so that as I'm writing, I always have this available to remind me where in the story I am, what I'm supposed to be doing, really what I'm supposed to be covering. Our first part of Act 1 would be the meeting. So what does a meeting do? Well, we can see here, it's an introduction to our characters and then setting up the timeline. And that's true. In our case, we're going to be meeting Peter Parker for the first time. Scene 1. We'll see here, I kind of populated this already, and this is why I make duplicates of all the folders, so that my cheat sheet notes, if I overwrite them, I can still go back and see, originally what I was supposed to accomplish there. So, we'll read this. Peter Parker, a 16-year-old high school student that lives with his Aunt May. Peter's from a low-income background and balances his high school life with his job at the Daily Bugle, taking photos for the paper. Peter is a brilliant science student who has a crush on his neighbor, Mary Jane Watson. So now I have sort of a framework in my first scene, in my first chapter of what I need to cover. And I'm not going to write that now, obviously, and what I've done is I've copied this into here so you could see how this easily turns into Peter, blah, 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 blah. We would keep writing, so to speak. Okay, so this is a top level folder. You're not seeing the scene because you're not clicked on chapter, which is one of the reasons I don't use chapter folders. But if we want here and to switch between these, it's really easy. So this is going to be your actual editor, and this is the corkboard view. This is the outline view. Okay. So we're going to go back to corkboard. I'm going to go back to the meeting folder. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new text. Okay. We're going to put test. So as I'm going along here, I can easily shift these index cards in and out of whatever scene or folder that I want just by dragging and dropping. That's the beauty of this thing. If you are one of these writers and you just like to keep adding these things, and that's how you outline, you can still do that and you can stay in one place. However, if you're just doing it in a linear fashion, and this is, for example, your inciting incident and your turning point, all you need to do is drag and drop these things where they go. The cards are basically what you're going to be writing on. And what I mean by that is basically the cards are the things you actually edit on. They're literally the same thing. So when you write this little kind of synopsis of what's going to go on, and then you start typing in here, your scenes and all this other stuff, that remains. So ultimately, these cards are what become of your, when you compile, what become your manuscript. It's going to grab all these scenes and mush them all together, and there you go, there's your book. We sort of established the meeting. We meet Peter Parker, we learn a little bit about him, right? And then we're going to go down to Inciting Incident. Now you see, here's my cheat notes. The event that begins the plot line, often resisted by your protagonist. Time to pose any dramatic questions. I've already gone ahead and done this already. If I go to my next scene, you'll see what I kind of put here. While at a science fair, Peter is bitten by a radioactive spider, which grants him super strength, hypersensors, and cat-like reflexes. He discovers he can use these powers for profit and enters a wrestling contest. When a promoter refuses to pay Peter, he leaves. Upon leaving, a burglar holds up the promoter. Peter has a chance to stop him, but he does not do so. So that's sort of if you know the story, you kind of know where this is going. That really is the inciting incident in sort of the Spider-Man origin story. The inciting incident is usually the area where you want to start, asking dramatic questions. In Peter's case, ultimately we're asking questions that, Peter is going to have to resolve now as a result of him letting this burglar get by him that later on we'll see has negative ramifications for him. And usually your protagonist, requires what they call a push. So this usually happens at the turning point. And a push means is that, something happens in the life of your protagonist that ultimately pushes them forward through the story, which also pushes your narrative forward. So these are things which would be, major things in our life and things that you're sort of building up to in the first two arcs. In our case, Peter returns home to find police at his house. We kind of know what kind of happens here. Burglar who he let go earlier broke into his house, shooting and killing his Uncle Ben. It is at that point that Peter decides to use his power to fight crime so same does not happen to someone else. So that's true, right? I mean, Peter lets the burglar go at the inciting incident, and now the turning point in the story is, that said burglar goes and kills his uncle, whacks out his uncle, so now he decides to use his power. Great power comes great responsibility, so the story goes, and now he's going to go fight crime. At this point, I think I'm just going to do like a little, kind of review of where we are in the story. We set up the meeting, at the beginning. This is Act 1 up until this point. We've got our inciting incident. Peter gains his powers. He goes to use them for, selfish reasons, and, that kind of backfires on him. And then obviously has second thoughts when his uncle is killed, and he decides to ultimately use his powers to fight crime. Somewhere in the beginning of your first act, you should have, some sort of hook. Something to really grab the reader's attention. It can be a spoken line. It could be, really anything. At that point, you want to have something in there that's going to draw the reader in. And the inciting incident really should change your protagonist's life forever. I mean, life-altering situation. And, the turning point is really like a call to action. And it should build on, it's almost like inciting incident 2, right? Like it builds on the first inciting incident to ultimately become a turning point in the story. If you look at the graph, Act 2 is a major part of your book and often where people struggle. You set up the beginning and you sort of want to get to the end, and now you have this drawn out part, which is going to take over the bulk of your book. You figure Act 1 is probably about the first quarter, and then Act 2 is going to be almost half of your book, if not half. Act 3 is usually a lot shorter, and a lot quicker because you're just getting to resolution. So at this point we're in Act 2, and Act 2 is, like we said, is the bulk of the book, but also where things sort of start to go to shit for the protagonist. Not that everything's going great for Peter right now, but at least he's Spider-Man. So we're going to go to what's called the first pinch. And the first pinch is really, the things that lead to the protagonist's first failure. So you'll see here now there are more scenes because, again, this is more, this is a bigger part of the book, Act 2. In our first scene, Peter trains to be Spider-Man. He makes his costume, makes his web shooters, he's swinging around New York and he's catching criminals and he's just having a good time. Then, he's not doing so great in school and he's starting to have problems there and he's having issues. He's got a little crush on Mary Jane, but she's dating Harry and it's kind of this big mess and tension and this and that. And then in the background, we have Harry's father, Norman, who is exploded himself as something or another and, becomes the Green Goblin. He begins now on a rampage through New York, attacking things and, doing all kinds of mischief and whatnot. And this, of course, gains the attention of Peter. Peter decides to let Mary Jane know how he feels. Finally, the Goblin, when he's not tearing shit up, he decides to call out Peter Parker, or I'm sorry, Spider-Man, and, make his life now a living hell because he needs a challenge. He's bored. This brings us to the midpoint. And the midpoint is a culmination of now the first pinch. Okay, so we're leading to Spider-Man's first failure, and right away we see, first of all, Harry has a big problem with Peter pushing up on his girlfriend. So, that's just not working for him. He lets Peter know, hey buddy, we ain't friends anymore. Aunt May has money issues. What? She can't afford her rent. She's gonna get evicted. This is terrible. Peter decides now he's finally got to go, Goblin calls him out. He's got to go take care of business.
he goes, goes to fight the goblin, and he gets his ass whipped. So that's not so good. And then immediately after, Mary Jane turns him down. What? I mean, this guy has just got the worst luck we've ever seen in our life. So you can kind of see the second arc is really just, from, the beginning of the first arc, and it's, this guy's life sucks. I mean, who wants to be him right now, even though he's Spider-Man? This leads us into the second pinch. And it's kind of deceiving because the second pinch is really, seems like everything's really going his way. Things are going to start to take, a little bit of a, go up a little bit. Peter is now in the first scene. He's mastering his powers. He's getting better. That ass whipping he took from the Green Goblin, he's not taking that. He's going out there. He's going to go train. He's going to go do his web shooters again and make it better. He's going to learn all kinds of backflips and stuff and whatnot. And he's going to decide he's going to go fight the Goblin again, which he does. He goes and fights the Goblin again. And this time, he gets a couple punches in. He doesn't get his ass kicked as much. Things are looking good, right? I mean, but not so good. The Goblin still whips on him a little bit. He's still not, they're not at the same level, so to speak. And then this leads us right into Act 3, which is resolution. So now, we've built this whole Act 2, all these different things, up, right? And then we go down. And then we're going to lead to the first thing, which is the turning point. So what does any good supervillain do when he starts to notice that he's on the same level with the villain or with the hero? Well, what he's going to do now, he's going to do something diabolical, right? So our buddy Green Goblin kidnaps Mary Jane. I mean, what a douchebag this guy is. But anyways, he kidnaps Mary Jane, and that is going to lead... Now remember, Act 3, just like the graphics showed, it's going to be quicker. It's not going to be a long, drawn-out thing. So this rushes Spider-Man to action. He's got his girl. Spidey's got to get moving. This leads us to what we call the stand-up, which is sort of self-explanatory, but this kind of makes Peter, evaluate everything he's doing. Is he doing the right thing? Is he's Spider-Man for the right reason? Is he going to do what's right, even though it affects his school, it affects his ability to make money, it affects, whether he can have a girlfriend or not, and ultimately decides to right the ship and do the right thing, and he's going to go hunt down a goblin. So this is the stand-up. He's had enough of this freaking Green Goblin. Now he's going to go find him and do what he's got to do. And he needs a little help. You know what I'm saying? We all need a little help. So he's going to go find Harry. He's going to beg Harry, listen, Google this guy or something and find out where he is. Help me find him. And Harry's going to reluctantly help his friend. And, see, things are starting to swing up a little bit now. You're kind of hinting towards, hey, maybe these guys can, patch things up, get back together, what have you. And then ultimately, MJ finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. Green Goblin lets him know, reveals the secret identity, says, hey, buddy, that guy in the webs and all that stuff is Peter Parker. And this is like a, kind of moment. Which leads us into the ending. Okay? He's got Harry's help. MJ already knows he's Spider-Man, so that's, you kind of anticipate, well, what's going to happen with that? And Spider-Man ultimately finds Green Goblin with MJ and, gives the guy a beating, just beats his ass. And, saves MJ, and MJ is safe, and, everything's great, and she knows he's Spider-Man, and now he knows why he's such a dork all the time, and ultimately decides that, in the last scene here, that she's decides she's going to be with him. He's great, he's Spider-Man, now she understands, and Harry thinks everything is great, their friendship is restored, and, they hug it out and everything, and they're bros, and all that stuff, and, Aunt May wins the lottery. So, in the midpoint where she was having some money problems, she wins the lottery. She buys everybody pizza, and then everybody goes home in the end.
I hope that was helpful. It's not a full-on tutorial of Scrivener, but it kind of gets you going. I've re-edited with everything from Scrivener 3.0, to kind of refresh the video. And if you're still using Scrivener 1.9 on Windows, because 3.0 is not available yet, and you're interested in that dark mode, why don't you check out this video right here.